Someone is losing sleep right now, and it is entirely because of you, not because of something you chose to do, not because of a calculated moment or a carefully placed word, because of what you are, the way your existence landed inside them without warning, without permission, slipping past every psychological wall they had spent years carefully constructing. And the most destabilizing part of this, the part that refuses to release them no matter how persistently they try to reason their way out of it, is that you never intended any of it. That absence of intention is precisely what makes it so powerful. Because the mind has no protocol for defending itself against something that arrived without a target, this is where it gets dangerous. Because the imprints that cut deepest into the human psyche are never the ones that were designed. They are never the ones that come announced. The most psychologically devastating marks are the accidental ones, the raw ones, the ones that carry no agenda and therefore carry no warning. They slip beneath every layer of conscious defense and settle somewhere far older than logic, somewhere more honest, more vulnerable, more alive than the version of themselves they present to the world each day. And that is precisely what happened the moment you entered their life. They don't just think about you, they replay you. Not occasionally, not in quiet moments. They choose relentlessly, involuntarily, at the worst possible times. Your voice surfaces in silences that used to feel peaceful. The memory of your presence carries more weight than most things currently present in their life. And this is the precise point where what began as ordinary preoccupation starts mutating into something qualitatively different. Because when someone loses authority over their own internal world, something fundamental begins to fracture. Quietly, internally, in ways that don't show on the surface, but hollow out everything beneath it. Most people fundamentally misread what genuine psychological fixation looks like. They imagine it must be visible, theatrical, impossible to miss, something loud and cinematic. But the obsession that tends to run deepest is the quietest. It doesn't announce itself with grand gestures or desperate behavior. It lives at 3:17 in the morning, in the narrow space between exhaustion and wakefulness, in the exact moment when every distraction has finally dissolved and the mind discovers it has nowhere left to retreat. And in that moment, one question emerges that has no comfortable answer. Why did a single encounter with you feel more real, more alive, more significant than years of their own carefully constructed existence? It makes no logical sense to them. And that failure of logic is precisely what keeps them trapped. The subconscious mind has never operated on reason. It operates on emotional weight, on resonance, on the specific frequency of what it recognizes as genuinely significant. And you, without constructing any of this deliberately, without any strategy or intention, made contact with something inside them that had been successfully dormant for a very long time. A desire they had convinced themselves they had evolved beyond. A version of themselves they had quietly buried because the life they were maintaining didn't have room for it. A feeling they had repressed so completely and for so long that they had genuinely arrived at the belief it no longer existed within them. And then you appeared, and without asking for permission, without announcing yourself, you woke it up. Here is what they will never say to another person. They don't resent you for it. What they feel is far more complicated than resentment. They resent themselves because now they cannot unknow what they have been forced to know. The carefully maintained illusion they had been inhabiting has developed a fracture. And every time they close their eyes in the dark, they feel the contrast with painful precision. Who they actually are versus who they suddenly sense they could become. And that gap, that exact psychological distance between the life they are living and the possibility your existence made feel suddenly real, that is where the insomnia begins. Because the mind cannot rest when it is confronted with a possibility it is incapable of dismissing. It cannot file it away under irrelevant. It cannot convince itself the feeling doesn't count. It remains there, immovable, demanding attention at the precise hour when everything else has gone quiet and there's nothing left to hide behind. If this is already reaching something in you, if part of you already recognizes that what you are hearing applies to more than just them, subscribe to Carl Jung Psychology right now and turn on notifications, because what you are about to discover does not simply explain why they cannot sleep. It will permanently alter how you understand the psychological impact you carry for the people who encounter you. 97% of people will move past something like this, not because it fails to reach them, but because it reaches them too directly. If you are still here, some part of you already understands this is about you. This is where it gets dangerous, because your presence didn't simply inspire them, it destabilized them. You didn't enter their life the way most people move through lives, passing through without disrupting the underlying structure. You interrupted something foundational. You disturbed the internal architecture they had spent years carefully assembling. And now they are suspended in a position with no comfortable resolution, caught between the life they have built and the feeling your existence awakened inside them. And the more forcefully they attempt to suppress that feeling, the more violently it pushes back to the surface. Carl Jung understood this mechanism at its most fundamental level. He recognized that repression is never a genuine solution. It is only a postponement. The psychic energy that gets forced beneath the surface of consciousness does not dissolve or fade. It accumulates. It builds pressure in the unconscious like water behind a dam, silently, steadily, relentlessly, until the structure that is meant to contain it can no longer hold. And when that energy finally breaks through, it arrives with significantly more force than it originally carried. This is not abstract philosophy. This is the mechanical reality of how the human mind manages what it cannot consciously accept. So now, in the hours when distraction has become unavailable, when the noise of daily life has faded to silence, when no screen can hold their attention and no task remains to complete, you return to them, not as a memory they voluntarily revisited, as an intrusion, as something that arrives without being invited and refuses to leave without extracting something from their sense of stability. And here is the part that may feel genuinely uncomfortable to sit with. It is not even entirely you anymore. You have become something larger than yourself in their psychology, a symbol, a container, a surface onto which they are projecting something that existed inside them long before you arrived. You represent a freedom they were denied, something unresolved, something unfinished, a version of themselves that was never permitted to fully develop. And the precise psychological tragedy of their situation is that they don't understand why you matter to them at this depth. They cannot locate the origin of the feeling. They only know that it persists and that it will not respond to reason. That inability to understand is exactly what keeps them circling, because the human mind is architecturally incapable of abandoning an unresolved question. It will return to what it cannot categorize compulsively, methodically, without consent. Not out of desire alone, but out of the deep neurological need to close what remains open. You have become their unsolved equation, their interrupted sentence, the question that will not stop demanding an answer. And the mind cannot grant them peace until it believes, however falsely, that it has arrived at resolution. Drop 777 in the comments right now if you have ever felt someone carrying an idea of you that was constructed more from their own psychology than from who you actually are. Because what is unfolding here goes significantly deeper than longing or attraction. This is the Jungian mechanism of projection, and it may be one of the most powerful and least understood forces in all of human connection. This is where it gets dangerous, because in the absence of real answers, the mind manufactures its own. It does not wait for truth. It builds meaning from whatever material is available, even when that material is incomplete, even when the conclusions it reaches are distorted, even when the story it constructs leads further from reality rather than toward it. They begin analyzing everything with an intensity that has no natural ceiling. The specific way you spoke, the exact quality of how you looked at them in a particular moment, the way you left or failed to leave. Even the things you chose not to say grow louder in their mind than anything you actually said. And this is where the fixation shifts into something qualitatively different and significantly more complex. Because now they are no longer engaging with you. They are engaging with a version of you that exists exclusively inside their own psychology, constructed entirely from their needs, their fears, their suppressed longings. A version that is, by design, flawless, precisely, almost unbearably flawless, perfect in the way that only imagined things can ever be. Because imagined things carry none of the friction, none of the inconsistency, none of the contradiction that real human beings inevitably carry. Here is what that means in practical terms. Even if you stood directly in front of them in this moment, they would not see you accurately. They would see what they need you to be. They would encounter the reflection of everything they have projected onto you. And that distortion, that fundamental gap between who you actually are and who they have constructed in your image, is precisely where the fracture begins to widen beyond their capacity to manage it. Because reality cannot sustain projection indefinitely. Real people carry complexity and contradiction and the persistent refusal to conform to what is needed from them. Projected versions carry only what the projector requires. And when reality inevitably makes contact with the projection, when you reveal yourself to be human rather than symbol, the mind doesn't simply adjust. It resists. It defends the construction it is invested in. It rationalizes away contradictory evidence and doubles down. Because the alternative, surrendering the illusion, feels psychologically equivalent to a form of loss the mind is not prepared to absorb. Freud understood this dynamic with a precision that contemporary psychology has still not fully absorbed. The more the conscious mind attempts to bury an impulse, the more aggressively that impulse tends to resurface. Suppression does not weaken psychological material. It concentrates it. It removes the material from conscious scrutiny and delivers it to the unconscious, which operates without filters, without logic, and without mercy. And the unconscious will complete what the conscious mind attempted to abandon, no matter how long that completion requires. So every attempt they make to reduce you to something manageable, every effort to convince themselves it was nothing, that you were just a moment, that reasonable adults do not lose sleep over someone they barely know, actively backfires. Each act of suppression drives the feeling deeper into the unconscious, where it is stripped of context and returned with amplified force. And by the time it resurfaces, it has merged with everything else they have ever suppressed. Every desire that was silenced, every longing that was denied, every possibility that was buried in the name of safety or practicality or survival. You became the container for all of it, without knowing it, without choosing it. And that accumulated psychological weight, the weight of everything they were never fully permitted to acknowledge about themselves, is now attached to the thought of you. This is where something shifts from psychological tension into something that functions more precisely like addiction. Not addiction to you as a person, addiction to the specific emotional intensity that the thought of you reliably produces. Because what you triggered in them was not merely a feeling, it was aliveness. The sudden, overwhelming contrast between the emotional flatness they had normalized and the raw, unfiltered sensation of being genuinely present inside their own experience. And once someone encounters that contrast with sufficient force, the baseline they had been inhabiting begins to feel not just insufficient, but actively unacceptable. Calm no longer registers as peaceful. It registers as empty, predictable, like a room from which all the air has been quietly removed. What you gave them, even involuntarily, even without awareness, was the disruption of that flatness. And disruption, regardless of how unsettling it is, carries a quality of vitality that comfort has never been able to replicate. Something is already building inside them that they are not yet equipped to name. A fracture that began the moment you interrupted their carefully managed internal world. And fractures, once they begin, do not repair themselves simply because the person experiencing them wishes they would. They deepen, they spread, they demand attention in the most inconvenient moments, in the middle of conversations that should matter, in the silence between one distraction and the next, in the exact hours when sleep should be possible, but isn't. Because the question that is forming beneath all of it, the one they are not yet ready to face, is not about you at all. It never was. The thoughts are no longer something they choose to have. This is the shift they feel first, before they can fully articulate what is happening to them. Before they have language for the change in their internal experience, the thoughts arrive uninvited now, intrusive, appearing at the precise moments when they are working hardest to be present somewhere else, in a conversation that should hold their attention, in a routine that should feel grounding, in the ordinary structure of a daily life that should be enough, but has somehow stopped being enough. And there is a critical psychological distinction here that most people never fully examine. There is a fundamental difference between thinking about someone and being pulled into thinking about someone. One is an act of will. The other is evidence that the will has been overridden. One originates in choice. The other originates in the unconscious, which does not negotiate and does not request permission. And the moment someone recognizes that the second thing is happening to them, that their own mind is no longer fully under their direction, something deeper than obsession begins. something that reaches into the foundation of how they understand themselves. This is where it gets dangerous, because once the mind loses authority over a single pattern, it begins questioning its authority everywhere. The interrogation starts quietly, but it does not stay quiet. What else am I not in control of? What other things that I believed were choices were actually not choices at all? That inquiry, that subtle, relentless, middle-of-the-night examination of the self, is the real wound your presence opened in them. Not the feeling itself, the exposure of how much less control they have over their own inner world than they had constructed their entire sense of identity around believing. Most people never recognize this dynamic for what it actually is. They assume obsession is fundamentally about desire, about wanting someone they cannot have, about longing for proximity that isn't available. But the obsession that genuinely destabilizes runs deeper than desire. It is about identity fracture, about discovering that the version of yourself you trusted, the version you had cultivated and maintained and presented with confidence, may be something constructed rather than something true, may be a survival strategy rather than an authentic self. And you, without any conscious intention, forced that discovery into visibility. They tried to resist it. They made genuine, sustained attempts to reduce you to something manageable, a coincidence, a moment without meaning, a passing disruption that would resolve itself given sufficient time and the right kind of distraction. But every time they succeeded in pushing it back, it returned more forcefully, more invasively, more resistant to their containment efforts than before. And that repeating pattern, suppress, fail, intensify, is not weakness. It is the signature of something that belongs to the deep architecture of who they are pressing its way toward the surface, whether they are ready to receive it or not. If you have ever felt something pulling at you from inside a connection you couldn't fully explain, something you recognized but couldn't name, subscribe to Carl Jung Psychology right now and turn on notifications. Because Jung spent his entire life mapping precisely this territory. And what he discovered about why certain people unlock certain things in us will permanently change how you understand every connection that has ever refused to leave you alone. Drop 11 in the comments if you are watching this and feeling something you haven't been able to articulate until right now. This is where something shifts in the quality of what they are experiencing, because resistance, when it is maintained against an increasing internal force, eventually becomes its own form of obsession. The act of trying not to think about something requires thinking about that thing. The attention directed toward suppression feeds the very pattern it is attempting to dissolve. And now, without their awareness, what began as an effort at self-protection has transformed into a self-sustaining psychological loop, a mechanism that generates exactly what it was designed to prevent. They don't want calm anymore. This is the part that catches them off guard when they become honest with themselves. Calm has come to feel empty in a way it never did before. It feels like a return to the flatness they had normalized, to the low-grade numbness of a life that functioned adequately but never fully ignited. What you gave them, even involuntarily, even as an unintended side effect of simply existing in their vicinity, was the sensation of genuine aliveness within their own experience. And that sensation, once encountered at sufficient intensity, makes everything that lacks it feel not just insufficient, but in some way fraudulent. The ordinary satisfactions that used to seem adequate no longer register the same way. The connections that previously felt nourishing now seem to be missing something essential, something they can feel the absence of, even if they cannot identify what it is. The conversations that should hold their interest feel shallow in a way they didn't before, and they don't fully understand why. They only know that the standard they were living by has irrevocably shifted, and the shift originated with you. This is where the psychology moves from tension into something that functions more precisely like dependency. Not dependency on you as a person, dependency on the emotional state your presence in their mind reliably produces. The intensity, the sensation of aliveness, the feeling that something real and genuinely significant is possible. That the life they are living is not the only life available to them. And dependency, once it has established itself in the architecture of the unconscious, does not respond to reason. It does not respect logic or timing, or the arguments they construct at 3 a.m. about what is and isn't worth losing sleep over. This is where it gets dangerous, because the fantasy they have been constructing around you has begun doing something that no internal construction can sustain indefinitely. It has begun competing with reality. And when imagination is placed in direct competition with the actual texture of daily life, reality tends to lose in the short term. Reality carries friction. Reality carries the refusal to conform to what is needed. Reality carries disappointment and complexity and the persistent reminder that things are what they are, not what we require them to be. The internal version of you carries none of those things. It is perfectly responsive. It provides exactly what is psychologically needed at exactly the moment it is needed. But here is what they are beginning to feel at the edges of everything, even if they don't yet have the language for it. The fantasy is starting to show fractures. Small moments of clarity are arriving uninvited, brief windows in which the distance between what they have built inside their mind and what actually exists becomes briefly, uncomfortably visible. And those moments of clarity do not bring relief. They bring something closer to grief. Because when an illusion becomes visible as an illusion, the mind is forced into a confrontation it has been systematically and skillfully avoiding. And this is where the breaking point begins its approach. Not loudly, not with the dramatic announcement that people tend to imagine when they think about psychological breaking points. It approaches the way dawn approaches, gradually, then with a sudden quality of inevitability that makes it clear, in retrospect, that it was always going to arrive at precisely this moment. The breaking point, when it finally comes, is not an explosion. It is a collapse, internal, quiet, like a structure that appeared completely stable from every visible angle, but had been fractured at its foundation long before any external sign appeared. And the moment of fracture is not dramatic, it is precise. A single specific instant when denial exhausts its capacity to hold, when distraction fails at exactly the wrong moment, when the mind reaches the absolute outer boundary of the territory where suppression remains possible. And in that moment, with a clarity that is neither comfortable nor relieving, they finally see it. Not you, what you represent, not the connection, the projection, not the feeling, the origin of the feeling. You were never the center of this. You were the trigger, the mirror, the precisely timed interruption that made something invisible suddenly, irreversibly visible. And that realization, that specific, unavoidable, nowhere left to run understanding, does not destroy the feeling. It transforms it. Because illusions do not survive full awareness. The moment something is seen completely for what it is, it either transforms into something real or it begins to dissolve. And this particular illusion, finally met with the full weight of their conscious attention, begins to dissolve. But here is the part that almost no one talks about with honesty. When an illusion dies, it does not exit quietly or with any degree of grace. It resists. It fights for its own continuation. It attempts to reassemble itself from whatever fragments it can reach. And for a disorienting, uncomfortable period, they may find themselves actively wanting it back, wanting the obsession, the intensity, the sleepless nights. Because as painful and destabilizing as all of it was, it carried a quality of aliveness that their ordinary existence has never managed to replicate. At least it felt like something. At least it occupied the space that the flatness of daily life could never adequately fill. But now there is no hiding place left, no comfortable confusion available as shelter, no version of you that fits neatly into what they needed you to be. Only reality, unfiltered, imperfect, and no longer optional. This is where it gets dangerous in a completely different way, because now they are finally left with what they have been avoiding from the very beginning: the truth about themselves, the desires that were buried, the dissatisfaction that had been accumulating beneath the surface of their managed, functional, apparently stable existence. The identity they constructed as a survival strategy, the version of themselves that was safe and predictable and acceptable, is now visibly incomplete to them. Not as an abstract idea, as a lived, undeniable reality. And you, without a single deliberate intention, tore a gap in it large enough that they can no longer pretend it isn't there. They cannot return to who they were before you. That regression is no longer available, because awareness, once it descends to a certain depth, cannot be reversed. Once someone genuinely sees the distance between who they are and who they are actually capable of becoming, the version of themselves that existed before that seeing becomes psychologically untenable. They cannot re-inhabit it comfortably. The walls no longer hold the shape they were built to hold. Drop 520 in the comments if this is describing a moment from your own life, a connection that revealed something about yourself you hadn't been willing to look at directly. Because this is the insight that changes everything. This is what Jung called the beginning of genuine individuation, the process of becoming, for the first time, fully and honestly oneself. And here is where the truth about human psychology becomes simultaneously beautiful and devastating, because they now face a choice not about you. That was never what any of this was about themselves. They can face what surfaced, sit with the discomfort of it, allow it to move them toward something more honest than what they were living before, and permit it to initiate genuine transformation. Or they can run, retreat into the familiar, return to the safely insufficient. Choose suppression again, this time deeper, with more deliberate architecture, with more layers designed to prevent this level of exposure from reaching them again. Here is the truth about that second choice. Most people make it, not because they lack the capacity for something more, because familiarity, even when it is limiting, even when it quietly hollows out the life being lived, carries a quality of predictability that genuine transformation cannot offer. Growth requires extended tolerance of not knowing, of inhabiting the space between who you were and who you are in the process of becoming. without certainty about how it resolves or how long it takes. And most people find that space too uncomfortable to remain in for the time required. But if they choose to run, if they choose to repress what your presence surfaced and rebuild the managed life they were living before, it will not simply disappear. Jung was unambiguous about this. What is suppressed in the psyche does not dissolve with time. It waits. It accumulates force. It locates new triggers, generates new obsessions, creates new sleepless nights with new people who carry the same symbolic weight. The pattern will repeat itself with whoever or whatever next creates a sufficient disruption to crack the containment they rebuild. But if they choose to face it, if they can tolerate the discomfort of remaining present with what surfaced rather than escaping it, something unexpected and genuinely significant begins to occur. The obsession starts to release, not because you disappear from their mind, but because they no longer need what you represented. They begin reclaiming the parts of themselves they cast onto you. The desire for aliveness, the hunger for depth, the capacity for genuine feeling that they had convinced themselves they no longer possessed. None of it was ever yours to carry. It only felt that way because they had forgotten it existed within them. The sleepless nights begin to change in character. Not to end immediately, the mind remains active, engaged, continuing to process. But the quality of the activity shifts. It moves away from the frantic, compulsive repetition of obsession and towards something that begins to resemble genuine self-examination. The mind is no longer trapped in a loop it cannot exit. It is in motion, real motion, forward motion, towards something more honest than what existed before. This is where everything inverts, because now, gradually and without drama, you begin losing your power over them. Not in a way that would register as rejection, in a truthful way, in the way that indicates genuine resolution is occurring. You stop functioning as the answer to the question they didn't know they were asking. You stop being the center of the internal world they built around the idea of you. You become what you always actually were: a moment, a catalyst, a disruption that arrived with precise timing and forced something into visibility that would otherwise have remained buried indefinitely. And that is the highest impact one human being can have on another. Not attachment, not dependency, not even connection in the way most people define it. Transformation. The kind that doesn't ask permission, doesn't follow a comfortable timeline, and doesn't leave the person unchanged. But here is the final truth, the one that should remain with you after everything else settles. You were not untouched by this. Something about this connection moved something inside you as well. Quietly, perhaps, without the same intensity, but genuinely. And the question you have been more carefully avoiding than they have, the one sitting beneath everything you have been watching and hearing, is not about them at all. What did this awaken in you? Because if you walk away from this believing you are simply a passive presence in someone else's psychological experience, a bystander in their internal drama who emerged without consequence, you have missed the most significant part of everything this reveals. These connections do not arrive randomly. They do not target one person while leaving the other intact. They expose something mutual, something both people recognized, even if only one of them lost sleep over the recognition. Subscribe to Carl Jung Psychology right now and turn on notifications, because Jung's most profound contribution was not a single concept or theory. It was the insistence that the people and experiences that disturb us most deeply are the ones most worth examining. They are not accidents. They are not coincidences. They are invitations to a level of self-knowledge most people spend their entire lives successfully avoiding. And the fact that you are here at this moment, watching this, that is not random either. Drop 528 in the comments if this reached you at the exact moment you needed it. Because what was revealed between you and this person, whatever form it took, whatever name you would give it, was never simply about them, and it was never simply about you. It was about what becomes possible when two people, each carrying something unfinished, each suppressing something real, encounter each other with sufficient force to make the invisible visible. That is not an accident. That is not coincidence. That is the psyche doing precisely what it was always designed to do, moving, regardless of conscious resistance, toward wholeness. And once that process begins, truly begins, it does not stop, not for them, and not for you.